right, so democracy. And we will be doing some comparative assessment to find out which countries are doing well in terms of democracy. But before we even proceed, if I will ask you this question, let me ask, which country do you think is the most democratic country as in 2026? Which country is the most democratic? Yes, Isaac.
The United States.
Ghana.
Ghana, yes.
Yes, Isaac.
Ghana.
Okay.
Our beloved country.
All right. Any other hand? Patrick.
United States.
Is there any other hand? Okay, Emmanuel. Emmanuel. Yes, Frimpong. Gloria, mute your microphone. Gloria. Emmanuel. Frimpong.
That means I don't think there's any country for now. The definition.
Okay. All right. Ebenezer.
So I think Sweden.
So, my dear friends, thank you all for the attempt. Okay. By the time we are through with this session or this topic, we can all comfortably point to the most democratic country. And as scholars of comparative politics, even when we are given 10 different countries or 20, we should be able to tell which of them is more democratic than the others, okay? And we will make use of empirical data so that the answer will not be, I think, okay? We will not use I think, or we will not mention a country because we have some kind of affective political culture or because we love that country. That's why we will mention. We will make use of data, my dear friends. We will use the Democracy Index, okay? We are going to use the Democracy Index. The latest report is the 2025 report, which was issued some few months ago in 2026. We will use that one. We will also use the Freedom House report. That is Freedom in the World 2026. We will use that to delineate which countries are more democratic than the others. All right. So, yeah, you should know what we mean by democracy. Okay, my dear friends. So today, we will look at two notions of democracy. We will look at the forms of democracy and then waves of democratization. Then we start with the comparison aspects, okay? Making use of these important data sets to ascertain the extent to which a country is a democracy. Even when you are given 4 different democracies or democratic countries, those who mention the United States, you will get to know that the US is not even a full democracy. Alexander, please mute your microphone. You will realize that the US is not even classified as a full democracy. Okay, so when you are asked to mention the most democratic state, the US will not come in because it is not. As Godwin, do mute your microphone. Okay, Godwin, do.
Okay. Yeah, but tendencies. Generally,
I've removed him from the class. I don't know what happens to him again if he attempts to join. All right. So we will use the data sets to compare democracies so that we get to know which countries are more democratic than the others. All right, that is the work of scholars of comparative politics. My dear friends, when you hear democracy, what comes to mind? What is democracy? Let's start from the known to swim to the unknown waters. Isaac.
So I would say democracy is governance that the people want. When there is a government in place that the people admire, they want, they voted for. That is democracy in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Patrick.
Majority rule.
Majority rule. Okay. Majority rule. Government that the people brought into power. Okay. All talking about people. Okay. So, my dear friends, these versions that we talked about, whether majority rule or the people voted the government, these are procedural in nature. Okay. These talk about the procedural aspects. So the question of what is democracy raises two notions of democracy. One, we have the procedural and then the substantive notions. These are the two distinct approaches to defining what democracy. When we talk of the procedural definitions, we are focusing on the way the regime is organized. Okay, so this notion pays attention to how the regime is organized and the processes by which representation, accountability, and legitimacy are assured. Like you mentioned, majority rule. So then it tells us how the regime is organized, right? And the processes by which our people are represented. If we vote, the candidate or the party that gets what majority of the votes is the one that what forms government, is the one that represents the people. Or if you have a situation where the people in the country are allowed to vote or elect their leader, as you mentioned, Isaac and Patrick. So these are the procedural definitions. Okay, they are the procedural definitions. Processes such as free and fair, transparent elections, majority rule, access to information, and all these independent judiciary. Now, these focus on the procedural definitions. Are you with me? Hello?
Yes, please. We are with you.
Fantastic, Dion. And that is the minimalist definition. Okay, minimalist definition. That is the minimalist definition. For example, when we ask who is a lady, then you can with the process.
they could, catch it.
Derek, with the procedural notion, you mentioned maybe some key features that females have or ladies have, right? That is the procedural. Okay. In this sense, then you'll be talking about the biological features, right? That is the minimalist, okay, approach. But then you might want to look out for certain features or behavioral outlook of, say, a lady. So then you go beyond, okay, the physiological aspects to the inner being, the personality of what? The person. So that, this one is a lady. So with democracy, the procedural focuses on how the regime is organized, okay? Whilst the substantive notions, we focus on important aspects, very, very crucial aspects of how the regime is performing in other relevant aspects. So my dear friends, with procedural, we are talking about the minimalist approach. Now, scholars like Peter have argued that the democratic method, which of course is the procedural, is that institutional arrangement for arriving at political decisions in which individuals acquire the power to decide by means of a competitive struggle for the people's vote. So by procedural, the focus is on elections. Did the government assume power through some form of elections?
Weekends mo home in Yeboah-Assiamah.
Asante. Na weekend you who or how obekɔ he? I know now I also see you who or ha. Asante. So that is the procedural. The focus is on elections. Did the people vote for their leaders? Then we check the box. Okay, well, the people were involved, and so that is the minimalist approach. Now for Robert Dahl and then Peter, democracy is an institutional arrangement for arriving at political decisions based on elections or a competitive struggle for people's votes. That is the minimalist approach. Once you meet this threshold, Peter and Dahl and the earlier scholars, well, you have met the threshold to be called a democracy. But we have also moved on to other meaningful conceptualization. If I will ask, Dion, why do people vote for their leaders? Why do we vote leaders? Why?
Because they want their leaders to rule over them. They believe in them, and that's why they bring them into power.
They believe in them to do what?
They believe in them that they can rule over them. Their leaders can rule over them.
Rule over them. Okay, Isaac, why do they want to rule over them?
They vote for them so that they will represent them.
For what? Felix?
For political decisions.
Decisions for what? Felix?
Yes, Doc. They vote for them because they believe they can solve their problems.
Good.
Yes, that's it.
They can solve their problems. Good. Problems such as?
Govern the affairs of the state.
Okay, to do what?
To govern
Provision
the
of
affairs.
amenities.
Amenities like what?
Yeah,
Provide social
schools, hospitals.
Schools, hospitals,
Yes.
infrastructure, security, employment. Okay, yes. So if you say to rule over them for what? So you need to talk about the end goal. Okay, the end goal to govern them for what? Talk about the end goals, right? So there are somewhat ends. There are some ends that people seek to achieve. They want their roads, infrastructure to be fixed. Access to social amenities, security, and all these very crucial. And that gives rise to the substantive notion. The substance is not just because we want leaders, not that we want you to come and rule us. But this notion deals with the goals. Okay, that's why I asked you to mention the goals. This notion deals with the goals and effectiveness of the regime. In how much to what extent has the regime been able to address the very goals or the ends of democracy? How have they been effective in providing what? Employment, in providing food security, in providing what? Infrastructure, what? Improvement, access to health, education. This deals with the goals and effectiveness of the regime and the extent to which the will of the people might be served in a more purposive sense. The people voted you, they entrusted the power for you to solve certain problems, to provide certain outcomes. Now, the substantive definition, we examine the extent to which the said democracy, has addressed these goals in a more purposive manner. Here, particular goals are envisaged such that real democracy cannot be defined by process alone, but also it entails efforts at promoting equality. To what extent has the regime been able to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor? The gap between maybe the northern sector, the southern sector, I mean, how is it addressing inequality problem? In other words, how is it promoting equality? Okay, well, let us bring social intervention, say free SHS, which is going to promote equality. Whether you are from a rich home or you are from a poor home, access to education should not be a problem. Okay, let us bring no fee stress, right? Yes, stress-free, so that we can cushion the people. We promote equality, access, inclusion. Now, the substantive concerns, scholars have argued, scholars like Held and Satori, they argue that if we don't pay attention to the substance of democracy, democracy cannot be viable. Democracy can even be cut short. Do you agree, Felix? Do you agree that if we don't pay attention to the substantive concerns, democracy, the lifespan of democracy can be cut short? Do you agree?
Yes, Doc, I agree.
Why?
Because, yes, largely, if you look at some of the countries such as Mali and others, you see that there was a military coup intervention simply because the people didn't trust the system. So they had to intervene to take matters into their own. I think that's one example of cut short the democracy.
That is fantastic. Okay. So when the democracy does not pay attention to the substance, the goal, the wishes of the people, in providing jobs, in ensuring that there is economic and social justice, these things can lead to a situation where the democracy is cut short. There could be revolution, coup d'etat, another kind of social movements that will cut short the regime. And so scholars like Merkel and Diamond Smith have argued that there is the need to pay attention to wider political participation. Civil liberties should be promoted. Independence of the judiciary, equality, and all this must be put in place to ensure that the democracy is a functioning one, not just the one that comes about through elections. Okay, are you with me? So when I ask you to define democracy using the two notions, I expect you to talk about the procedural and then the substantive notions. Now, these are the core values of democracy: liberty, people's what, freedoms and rights. Okay, equality. Okay, equality, justice, and then human rights. Okay, human rights which are given. These are core values or canons of democracy. You cannot have any democracy worth its salt when these four core values are missing. So any state that calls itself democracy, these core values must be respected. Yes, Ebenezer.
Doc, I want to find out something. When you look at Ghana as a comparativist, I want to ask, is our democracy being abused in the area of freedom of speech, accountability, um, um, uh, and other things, and also like social interventions and other things? Probably someone would say that we've made strides. I mean, coming from the 80s, maybe even post-colonial and all. But between, let's say, 2008, or is democracy also empowering people to abuse it? Because sometimes, like, a time will come that this country will not hold democracies to gain based on the things that have been happening. And when you look at it, it looks like the political elite, people are losing trust and confidence in them. That is why I am asking this question. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. So this question raises issues of democratic backsliding and other things. And you are right, you are spot on when you say that whether our democracy is being abused or what have you. Okay, there is a phenomenon called democratic backsliding, and it will be our next topic after this one. And so I will not belabor the point. And if you say Ghana is experiencing that, it is a fact. Okay, it is a fact. There has been a trend, not now, okay, but has been a trend over time. And the data set which we will illustrate, okay, next week, the democracy index, you will see that there has been a downward trend of Ghana's democracy index. Okay, yeah. So let's look at two main forms of democracy. Okay, please note the features of democracy. Okay, periodic election, separation of powers, checks and balances, rule of law, respect for human rights, and this. Okay, note them. They are things you have to know, should be at your fingertips, except that for the purpose of our discourse, I will not ask you to give me features of democracy, because this is something you don't have to be a comparativist before you know these, things, okay? And so note them, just that it is good for you. It will be a great indictment if a comparativist, you are unable to mention at least 5 of these, okay? But let's look at more crucial issues, which if you are not a comparativist, it will be difficult for you to know these things. These ones, you need to be a comparativist before you will know. Now, forms of democracy. We have liberal democracy and illiberal democracy. Now, by liberal democracy, okay, Mariama, mute your microphone. By liberal democracy, Mariama, you are not ready for us.
Please, I'm sorry.
Okay, at least you are alert. You are there. Otherwise, I was going to remove you. At least.
Please, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, please mute it. Okay. Now, by liberal democracy,
My friend,
Amuzu,
your friends are host in Pamba.
Mr. Amuzu, are you there? Okay.
Sorry, sir.
All right. By liberal democracy, we are saying that first they accept a popular election, okay, which is of course that is the first criteria. The minimalist or the procedural, but that one cuts across both liberal and illiberal. Now, liberal democracies embrace the notion of freely elected government, which is election. But now look at where I've highlighted in red. They add a distinct concern with limits on the executive scope. So that is what makes a democracy liberal democracy. A liberal democracy is the one where there are limitations put on the powers of the executive. Okay. Once we hear liberal democracy, it means the executive or the government's powers have been limited, have deliberately been limited, so that the government cannot abuse the people's rights. Now, once we deliberately reduce the powers of the executive or the government, we give these powers to the citizens or the people. So those who read agriculture, the process whereby the unwanted parts of a plant are cut using secateurs. What is that process?
Pruning.
Fantastic. Pruning. Okay. We prune the tree, so we cut some of the hedges, the trees, the branches, So in liberal democracy, we also prune the powers of the executive. We deliberately, prune the powers of the executive such that the government or the executive is not absolute. We cut short the powers and then give these access to the people or the citizens in the form of more human rights. So in liberal democracies, the people have fundamental human rights, more, that they can even challenge their government in courts. Okay, you are there, the government cannot just come and take your property. Loveless. The government cannot just come and take your property. If they decide to do that without due process, you can take them to court and the court will rule and restrain them, will put a restraining order, and hey, you cannot take your people's property just like that. Even the government cannot just start taking taxes from the people. They have to go through a setting of processes. GRA cannot just get up and then taking taxes from people's companies. They have to also go through a setting of procedure. Otherwise, the people can challenge these actions. Even there are some actions that our government will take, then the people can challenge. Just yesterday or last 2 days, Honorable Kwajo Nkrumah is challenging the Chief Justice, that the directive that he gave appears unconstitutional. And so then he has filed a motion at the Supreme Court for interpretation or something. Clearly, in liberal democracies, the executive or the government is not absolutely powerful. We have deliberately cut some of the powers and giving them to the people in the form of human rights. So when you read Ghana's constitution, Article 1, it will say this constitution is the supreme law of the land. Any other law, even if the law is made by the government, the executive, the legislature, any other law which is contrary to this constitution to the extent of that inconsistency, be declared null and void. Okay, void. Which means that the government cannot use their whims and caprices to make, laws or decisions that contradict the Constitution. And the Constitution in Chapter 5, labeled as fundamental human rights and freedoms, gives what? A whole lot of rights to the people. That you cannot just arrest anybody and detain them. No, you cannot just do that. You need to tell them what they have done. Give them the right to any counsel or lawyer of their choice. Right? You cannot hold them beyond 48 hours. And, and these are things that the Constitution has given to the people to protect their rights. And the government is limited with things that it can do. Even if you want to arrest, it should be within 48 hours, beyond which process the person for court. Otherwise, give them bail or take them to court for the court to determine whether it will want to continue, to detain them, whether it is warranted. That is liberal democracy. So the scope or the powers of the executives are limited. So we call it limited government. Are you with me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
The opposite is illiberal democracy. Now, in illiberal democracy, they also accept elections, but this is combined with persistence or even reintroduction of restrictions and limits on people's rights and freedom. So it is the stark opposite of liberal democracy. In illiberal democracy, the government's powers are too excessive, and the people do not have freedoms and liberties. That's a typical example of a liberal democracy. Ghana, under the 1960 Constitution, under Nkrumah, will be ushered into an illiberal democracy, where the executive for Nkrumah was given too much powers, enormous powers. The scope of the executive was absolute, it was not limited. And the people were not given fundamental freedoms and rights. There was no Bill of Rights. There was no Bill of Rights. The only time things like liberties, freedoms, and rights will be mentioned will be in the coronation oath. So when Nkrumah was being sworn in, say, I, Kwame Nkrumah, having been elected, do swear to be good to the people. I swear to uphold their liberties and freedoms. That was at best what was mentioned. But the Constitution itself had nothing like a Bill of Rights. And so people like Akoto and others, Inri Akoto, when their freedoms were being violated, then they took the matter to court. Now, when you take your matter to court, you need to have grounds why you are in court. But they didn't get any provision in the Constitution to support them to say that they have these rights and the government is trampling upon it. So what their lawyers will say is that, well, when the president was being sworn in, he promised to uphold the people's liberties and freedoms. And the judge will say that, oh, that coronation oath, that one, they are mere wishes, mere aspirations. In other words, they are Nkekahunu. They are Nkekahunu. If you want to rely on that, you are wearing bareback. Okay? If you want to rely on those, coronation oaths, they are not enforceable. In law, we say they are not justiciable. They are not justiciable. You cannot base on that to bring something to court. So we don't have any provision, to rely on that to give you the reliefs you are seeking. These ones are based on the magnanimity or the kindness of the president. If he wishes, he will do. If he doesn't, because they are not justiciable. So going into the Third Republic, okay, and for that matter, even the current, let's use the Fourth Republic. It is based on the experience of Akoto, Henry Akoto and his, colleagues, that we have a whole chapter in the subsequent constitutions, okay? For example, in the 1992 Constitution, you have chapter 5, labeled as what? Fundamental freedoms and rights. Chapter 5. Article 14, 19. You cannot be arrested, without they telling you what you have done. There can be no punishment when there is no law to that. You cannot have any law when the punishment is not stated in the law. All these are in what? In the Constitution. So that if you arrest somebody and that there is no offense, you need to state the offense. So when you are prosecuting, maybe Kofi Yesu has stolen someone's maybe someone's plantain, contrary to maybe section 24 of the criminal code. Okay, so the judge will check. Okay, yes, there is a law that you should not take somebody's thing, blah, 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 blah. And if you take that, the stated punishment is in the law also. So this is a distinction between liberal democracy and then illiberal democracy. In illiberal democracy, the government has enormous powers, absolute powers, and the people do not have freedoms. They don't have rights. In fact, they have restrictions on their freedoms. That's the difference between the two. Are you with me? All right. Hello.
Hi, we are with you, please.
Prof,
Very good. So let's look at two main types of democracy, direct and then representative democracy. Listen with rapt attention. All right, ladies and gentlemen, tell me what you gathered from the video. What did you gather? Anything that you heard?
I heard democracy was the worst of governance by wind, and also rule of the democracy is the rule of the people. And
so, what is your understanding of Churchill's assertion? Yes, because it appears you are misquoting him. Okay. Yes, it's just like saying that it's the worst form of government, except that when it is compared to all other forms, there's nothing that you can compare to it. That is what he's trying to say. The worst, except, that you don't have any other better alternative as well. It's like a necessary evil.
Yeah.
That is what it means. Okay. Felix, what did you also hear? Yes, Felix. Otherwise, Isaac. Did you hear Magna Carta?
Thank you, Prof. I heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard that democracy, the kings used to do whatever they wanted until there was a law signed, and they had to also follow the law.
That's the Magna Carta, 1215. 1215. Yes, so last week, when we were talking about patterns of state formation, do you remember the England pattern?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Kings facing judges or other representatives. And that's the Magna Carta. The barons compelled the King of England to sign the Magna Carta so that the king will also follow the laws of England. Quality. All right, Alexander.
Yes, sir. He also mentioned of democracy is not only about election, but also the other factors of democracy. It's not only about election, but other factors also.
So, what notion of democracy is that? Yes, Alex. What notion of the definition? What notion of democracy is that? When they say it's not just about elections. That is a substantive notion of democracy, right? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hi.
That is the substantive. That's the substantive notion of democracy. All right. So we have direct democracy. I mean, the one that was practiced in Athenian or Greek. The citizens themselves debated and will reach decision that is to their common interest. Okay, that is direct democracy. In Athens, the citizens were the primary agent for reaching all decisions. And the word democracy is from the Greek demokratia. Now, demos, or the demo in democracy, is from the word demos, which means the people. Demos means people. And then the cracy in democracy is from the Greek word kratos. Okay, kratos means rule. Kratos means rule or power. Okay, so in short, it means rule by the people themselves or power to the people. So the etymology of democracy came from the how democracy was practiced in Athenian Greece, where all qualified, people will gather and then will make decisions, collective decisions to govern their affairs. That is direct democracy. All adult citizens who are qualified will gather and then make decisions and deliberate. Okay. But now, even though we are saying that all Moniru, please mute your microphone. Even though we are saying that all adult males, will meet, well, it doesn't mean that the thing was without challenges. It was not all adult males, but all qualified adult males. So clearly there was also discrimination with that. Citizenship was restricted to only men. Only men. Women were, females were not included. And even with the men, only citizens or only the people whose parents or grandparents were themselves citizens. So that if you were a son of a slave or grandson of a slave, clearly you were not given access to this all-important exercise. So, in short, it was not everybody. It was only males, and even with the males, only those who were citizens. Okay, all right. Now, the other type of democracy is representation. In contemporary times, at the national level, all liberal democracies are representative in nature. Okay, you cannot take all the people to one stadium for them to make decisions. No, we cannot all meet under one tree or one area and then be making decisions. Is it possible? Well, they say, Daniel, are you there? Is it possible for over 34 million people to go and stay somewhere that we are making decisions? How will we even reach what? A common agreement? So at national level, all contemporary liberal democracies are representative. So let's say 7th December, all the people who are registered will go and vote for one person to become the chief executive, okay? The head of states and head of government. So we all vote. The presidential is what? One constituency. So we all vote. At the end of the day, the returning officer, who is the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, will make a declaration that, candidate John Dramani Mahama, won. And then the person will be sworn in, giving what? The state authority. Then they make decisions which are binding. Okay, if they go and say that the people in Haiti or they are struggling, so Ghana is going to give them 1,000 rice. We are sending our military there to help them. Or yesterday, government has maybe given 1 billion Ghana cedis to revitalize Oboko, to revitalize Boko after the war. Now, once the leaders you have voted for, if they make decisions, they are binding on you. And they don't even have to come to you to seek your consent before they make that decision. Okay? They take the decision. So that is for the executive. Then with the legislature too, we divide the whole country into different constituencies for the purposes of legislative representation, who represent our interests. But according to J.J. Rousseau, it is expected that the people we have elected, like the MPs or the president, they will do things that reflect what we want. That is what Rousseau calls the general will. You do hear that in the video, that the leaders we have chosen, they will do things that represent our general will. And that is a more reason why when the MPs or presidents, they hear LGBTQ, I mean, they don't want to even what? They don't want to hear it because the entire society appears to dislike it. And since the leaders want to reflect the general will, okay, say, hey, this one cannot thrive in the country. Because they say culturally, religious, blah, 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 the people of Ghana do not like it. So it will not be what? In my tenure. And I believe if everybody say it will not be in my tenure, it will not be in my tenure, clearly that is the embodiment of the general will of the people. In many societies where today it is legal, some time ago it was what? Illegal, because it reflected the general will of the people. But maybe as society grew also, I mean, then the general was that, okay, well, let us go for it. But leadership represents the general will or embodiment of the sentiments of the people. But Rousseau also says that the moment the people give themselves representatives, they cease to exist. They are no longer free. Do you agree with him, Rousseau? The moment you appoint leaders, you're no longer free. You don't exist. Do you agree?
So we disagree. That's not always the case.
Why? But
because it depends on the leader.
Okay.
It takes like he's faithful and he does what he promised to do, and the people like it. Then that's a plus. But he takes the law into his own hands, and that's problem. So it's special.
But when the president was going to announce that we were going to give 1,000 bags of rice to Haiti, did he come to you?
No.
And once he promised that, can you challenge it? Would you say that, no, even our community, when you come to our place, some people are hungry, they don't have rice. You are going to give the rice to Haiti. Or, you see, so in a way, it is true. Look, when Parliament is passing a law, would they come to you? Once they pass it, it is binding on you because you have given them the power. They are your representatives. If they pass a tribunal law, okay, yes, they pass it. The society you cease to exist because then they are there to make decisions for you. But the good thing is that, and I like it, the preamble you give, not entirely, okay? Because when they are making law, sometimes they allow for people to bring their memorandum. Different groups send of memoranda. They do stakeholder consultations. Groups that do not agree can also petition them. People can demonstrate. Even when the law is passed, people can still what? Demonstrate. And so if you say that, well, even though we are giving powers to the leaders, of course, they are to make decisions on our behalf, but we exist. It doesn't mean that we are just for zombies. We cannot express our, discontent, okay? Or we cannot demonstrate on dissent. We cannot demonstrate our disagreement with the rules or the policies they make. There have been laws that the government has passed. Now the people have shown stark disagreement, using a lot of petitions, demonstrations, and what have you, to compel government to abandon such policies, right? So in a way, the people don't cease to exist. They are there. They can also show they can call for some accountability. All right. Do you agree? So in both ways, Rousseau is right. Depends on how you argue your case out. Let's talk about waves of democratization. My dear friends, are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Doctor, we are with you.
All right, let's talk about waves of democratization. Now, in the history of the globe, you see, states, before states, okay, we had what kingdoms and what have you, empires and the likes. And these were entities where there was no election. Are you with me? Right? Hello? Yes.
No, I'm with you.
In these for territories, it's not about election. Okay. Hereditary and then what have you. Now, when we talk of wave of democratization, we're talking about a period where many countries would adopted some form of elections. So let's say, states were essentially not using any form of election to select leaders. Even they did not meet the minimalist criteria, the minimalist threshold. So if you had a period where many states adopted even the minimal criteria, just elections, elections we will accept. So wave simply means a period where many countries adopted some form of electoral process in selection of leaders. Okay, so in short, when you have many countries moving from non-democracy to democracy within a period, we call that as a wave of democratization. Wave of democratization. So in political science, when you hear wave of democracy, it refers to a major surge of democracy in history. When you have a period where, you see, when we say there's a surge in the current, it means the current has gone up. All of a sudden, there's a surge. Surge means there's an increase in the number of democracy in history. According to Samuel Huntington, it involves a group of transitions from non-democratic to democratic regimes, which occur within a period. And that significantly outnumber transitions in the opposite directions during that period. Who is a Krife here? Hey, oh, no, not Krife. I would say, who is an apostle here? Or is a pastor here? Osofo. Osofo, don't deny God. Though.
Mr. Denise.
Yes, sir.
Osofo, where is Osofo? Osofo, are you there?
I'm here.
So when you go and do dawn broadcasting, or when you go and do evangelism, what is the goal?
The goal is to let the word of God. That's the end goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe state it in other words.
The goal to win souls for God.
The goal is to win souls for God. Yes, to bring them to the vineyard. Also, is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
So let's say at the end of the crusade, you got about 50 people coming to the vineyard. But you are also aware that within the period, some people also leave the vineyard, right? You see, some people also leave the vineyard because we cannot control. So whilst many are coming, maybe few are joining. So if we have a period, okay, where many countries move from non-democracy to democracy. But that number significantly will outnumber maybe those who are living with democracy to non-democracy. Just like people living the vineyard, but you also will bring in more. Now, if the ones you are bringing are more than maybe the few who are living, you call that what? As wave, as a wave. Okay, wave of democratization. Many countries are becoming what, democracies. But maybe within the period, you can have a few who are also moving in the opposite or direction during that period. And this was popularized by Samuel Huntington.
You know, Resmo.
Samuel Huntington, okay? And so also now the people who live the vineyard, what term do we use for them? We say what has happened to their faith?
They backslided.
Yes, they backslided. So backsliding is also a popular term in comparative politics. Okay, so that is that countries undergoing or having undergone transition to democracy are also subject to democratic backsliding. It's just like people who come to the vineyard, well, they are sometimes also subject to backsliding. They can backslide just like what democracies. And democratic backsliding, as I mentioned, is a critical topic in comparative politics. This is because there is a general backsliding in democracy globally. And Ghana is a victim, but it is not an exception. It's a global trend. Many countries are witnessing democratic backsliding. Okay, just that democratic backsliding can take two angles, two routes. More used is the one which the democracy is reducing in quality gradually. It's just like the person is still in the vineyard, but also maybe some of their actions. So what mentioned 3 actions that is, well, the sister or the brother still comes to church, but maybe because of 1 or 2 actions, you can say, the brother or the sister is backsliding. I also will mention 2 or 3 things.
The one is the of the person from the beginning, no.
Yes.
Now as a Swati.
A Swati. Okay.
Yes, that's one.
Right.
Number 2. Okay, let
okay, yeah. So, but they will still be coming to church, right? They'll still be coming, but then you see, when you see their level of maybe participation or the way they used to do things, it has reduced. So that is one angle of democratic backsliding. The country is still a democracy, but in terms of certain features or characteristics like people's freedoms and liberties, the electoral process, political participation, political culture, there is a reduction in the quality of these aspects. Can say, Charlie, maybe Ghana's democracy is backsliding, US democracy is backsliding. Another angle is when the sister or the brother will say, hey, also for sorry, I'm no longer coming to church. Majai. You see, that one is sudden, isn't it? It's too radical. Then you can see it. So in democratic backsliding too, you have the sudden one, like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. What happened? Yes, Patrick, what happened there?
C'est un coup d'État.
They were democracies. We went to sleep. The next morning, the soldiers have taken over. That is backsliding. But this is too sudden, too rapid, okay, too revolutionary. That is our next topic, okay, after this. We will look at backsliding, democratic backsliding. But, my dear friends, there have been three main waves of democratization. The first wave began in the 1826. Some scholars would say 1828, okay, but now look at this. Can you see my cursor? Can you see the cursor? So
Yes,
trace this downwards. You see, it's in the 18th, right? 18th. So from 1826, 1828, you could see that there was some kind of rise. And some scholars even will put it 19th, because it is a transition. You see, transition, then the number began to rise rapidly, okay? Many countries were adopting democracies. You see, the number was increasing to nearly, over nearly 40 different countries adopting some minimal form of democracy in the first wave. So nearly 30 countries, okay, established at least minimally democratic or national institutions. So even though their democracy was not maybe liberal democracy, okay, or democracy where all the core values were so upheld, but at least minimally, they met the minimalist or criteria. So countries like Germany, Argentina, and Australia and the likes, the first wave. But there was a reversal in 1922. In 1922, okay, you see from here, it started to fall. Can you see the cursor? So many countries were now going back to non-democracies, meaning maybe people will come to power and then they will collapse all the institutions of democracy. Then they will entrench themselves in power. And they started in Italy when Benito Mussolini rose to power. Then he started attacking the institutions of democracy. In the end, he established his fascism regime, military expansion. And so he began it, and then many countries in Europe also followed suit. They also did as Italy was doing. And so by the 1940s, the number of countries which were democracies will reduce from 30 to at least 12 to 12. Okay, so that was the first wave beginning from 1826, 1828, rising gradually, such that it will reach some peak by the 1920s. But from 1922, it will start to fall, beginning in Italy. So it will reach lowest ebb. Bernard Nyako, Bishop Bernard Nyako, please mute. So it will reach lowest ebb by 1942, when the numbers will drop to nearly only 12. And now a distinctive feature of this first wave was that it was sequential and slow. This was the period democracy itself was developing. Okay, so even though they started with the minimalist approach, democracy itself will be developing within this era. All right, now we have the second wave. The second wave will begin after 1945. This was after the Second World War. Okay, you see, after the Second World War, the colonial powers that took part. Bernard Nyako, I will remove you from the class. That's your last. After the Second World War, the colonial powers, Britain, okay, had become weak because of the war. Germany, France, and the likes. These had been devastated by the war, such that they themselves even needed a Marshall Plan from the Bretton Woods institutions. Okay, they themselves were on oxygen support. They needed a Marshall Plan, okay, to revamp their economies. And so they were weak. And if you were weak and you were having empires in Ghana, Nigeria, some in India, and so clearly, even in terms of military and then resources, these states had become weak to control their external territories. And so the least resistance you will do, they will grant you independence. Okay, so many countries will be granted independence. Okay, beginning with India, we will look at the waves of the state formation. So a lot of countries became democracies during this era. A lot of countries became democracies because they will gain their independence. Okay, they will gain their independence during this era. That is after the Second World War. Are you with me? Hello. So many countries, yes, many countries will gain independence during this era. When did Ghana gain independence?
1957, 6 March.
So many states after the Second World War gained their independence, and so they were no longer part of an empire, but they became sovereign states, okay, recognized de jure. So they will be part of this. But this wave will be reversed in the 1960s, okay? In the 1960s, what happened? When was the first coup d'etat in Ghana? First coup d'etat in Ghana. Sorry?
February 66.
1966, okay. Yes, so you see that in the 1960s and 70s, many countries experienced military intervention. And so most of the democracies were cut short. So there was a reversal to non-democracy, okay? And that was the second wave. Now the third wave will begin in Portugal in 1974, but it will reach its peak after 1989, okay? And 1989, the early 1990, that will be when the Soviet Union will be weakening and will collapse. Once the Soviet Union will collapse, the Soviet bloc collapsed, many countries emerged from this or the Soviet bloc. Okay, several countries will emerge from the Soviet Union, and because they had seen what the Western countries they had prospered in terms of their economy and their society. So when the Soviet Union will collapse, the resultant states will adopt some form of democracies. So that was the third wave, which will begin from 74, but then will reach its peak during the collapse of the Soviet Union. All right, great. So my dear friends, that is that for the waves of democratization. So here we are. You have the first wave, the second wave, and then the third wave. Let's look at democratic development. Now, democracy, I mentioned that in the first wave, the countries that became democracies, they adopted minimalist criteria, okay? Maybe election. Now, election, no cry. maybe only a few adult males, okay, were eligible to vote. Well, but okay, we just took it like that because there was some form of election. But it will take time for democratic principles to develop. Even within the first wave, it will take time for these credentials to develop, okay, to develop. Now, according to Robert Dahl, democracies have developed, and there are 3 great milestones. So let's say that countries like US, they have adopted democracy. And by democracy, just elections. And the election, only few people are taking part. But we take it to be democracy. But with time, this democracy will be developing. It's just like you went for the dumb broadcasting of, you went for the, and someone says they have repented. Maybe you went to the ghetto to preach. Also, you went to the ghetto to preach. And the guy said, also, they are kind of, what's Makuma, I have to come. But as the guy was coming, one row to another, but he's come to the church, right? With one row. Also, will you be happy or not?
Only God can judge.
Also,
at least
will you be happy
at
or
least
not?
to consider.
Yes.
So I don't judge them. I was in Spain last year, and when I closed church, in front of the church, the guys were smoking, and
Yes.
to be honest, I was like, "How you can make a come out
So the thing is that,
yeah,
I mean, they taking the first step to come. Okay, it's even a win, because as they come, they are baby Christians. You know that maybe with time, okay, with time, as just like when the baby is born, okay, with time they start to sit. With time they start to stand up. With time they start to crawl, right? So they're taking the first step to come. Oh, you do the sign of cross. You know that the first step is even enough. It's just like the taking the first step. Dion, I said that, well, even just giving the number is the first step. That first step. But here, the thing is that as the states adopt minimal form of democracy, with time, they improve, they develop. So the first step is incorporation. So this was when the mass of the citizens was gradually admitted into political society. In other words, they will be extending the suffrage, the people eligible to vote. Okay, many jurisdictions, only the men, and even the men, only the citizens. Okay, but with time, they incorporated many people into the voting arena. So with time, then they will allow all males to take part in the elections. Isaac, let me leave it there. Hi,
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that with time, there was incorporation, extension of the suffrage. Now all males will be included.
Giving them.
Whether you were from a slave, grandfather or slave or parents.
Yeah.
They were included. There was extension of the suffrage.
I'll bring it to you when I'm done.
Whose microphone? Omaniba, please mute your microphone. Okay. So countries like Germany, France, and Switzerland, they were the first in 1848. Okay. to allow, all males to take part in election. All males, whether you were from a slave background or not, that is what? Male suffrage. Full male suffrage. They extended the suffrage. Now, this was followed by US in 1870 when former slaves were enfranchised. Now, these things that we're talking about, they didn't just occur. They didn't occur on silver platter. All these occurred through some kind of confrontation, agitation on the part of those who were excluded. Right? Is that true? In US?
Yes, sir.
The blacks, they had to protest, do a lot of protests, civil disobedience and what have you, before they'll be incorporated. Okay, so it was not true by, sleeping and then dining that this incorporation would be, would occur. Now, female suffrage was a bit slower. Okay, the first countries to introduce universal female suffrage and hence universal suffrage were New Zealand. Now, note New Zealand very well. New Zealand is an ancient democracy. It was the first to introduce universal adult suffrage, because before then, all the males had been incorporated. So by the time it allowed females into it, then clearly it was what? Universal adult suffrage, right? Followed by Australia and then Finland. Yes, Felix.
Hello, Doc. Yes, Doc, I wanted to ask that why is it that most often many people refer to US as the oldest democracy?
As the oldest democracy?
Yes, please.
That is not a best description. You can say one of the oldest democracies, okay? One of the oldest democracies, because then you are not tracing to the very startup of our democracies, okay? Yeah, but here we are looking at the incorporation, okay? The incorporation, those that extended the suffrage over time, okay? But it is part of the first wave. So let me take you back. Now you see the first wave. So if you say one of the first, fine. You have the first wave where many countries adopted, okay? Especially many of these even Scandinavian countries. And they even advanced to develop their democracy by incorporating, okay? Incorporating, as we mentioned, New Zealand as the first to introduce universal adult suffrage. In UK accorded women equal voting rights with men in 1928. That was somewhat recent. In 1928, that was when UK will allow women equal voting rights. Now in UK, until 1950, university graduates could vote twice. So it was not one person, one vote. If you were a graduate, you could vote for twice in some of the university constituencies. So let's say you were in Manchester, which is a typical, or if you were in Cambridge or Oxford, typical university constituency, and you were a graduate, then you will vote for twice, whilst non-graduates will vote only one. Clearly, democracy has gone through a lot of trajectories. So that's the first, according to Robert Dahl. Now, the second was representation, when the right to organize parties was accepted and have these to participate in parliament on equal terms, formal registration and recognition, and all this, democracy has gone through this. The third is organized opposition. This was when the won the right to appeal for votes against the government, okay, where organized opposition was recognized, okay, in democracies today, many contemporary democracies, the role of the opposition is what is so recognized, recognized. All right, my dear friends, good. Here we are. So we've done all the theoretical aspects about democracy. Any question, comments before we start with comparison? Any question, comments? Yes, Felix.
Okay, Doc. Sorry, earlier when you called me, I think
Felix.
I was. Hello, Doc.
I'm a professor.
Okay.
You have to
Prof.
address me properly.
Yeah, sorry, Prof.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Prof. I wanted to say this earlier on when you played a video for us, right?
Yes.
The Churchill's, my understanding about Churchill's quotes or Churchill's statement was that he said democracy is not good or democracy is the worst form. I wanted to believe that he believed on the is it illiberal democracy. So his point, he doesn't believe in the liberal democracy. So basically, that was the reason why he made that kind of statement. I don't know if I'm right.
Isaac. Isaac, you want to answer
Yes,
him?
sir. No, I would want to ask a question.
Okay.
So later, after you answer.
Okay, ask your question.
Sir, please. My question is that we always say, and even I've heard here that the government is abusing people's rights. But how is in most cases we do also see people trying to abuse the government's rights. We do some in Ghana. Governments do take decisions against them. It appears that the opposition party that is benefit from which will start out saying that the government is right. Now, you see in democratic system, people abuse the politicians or the presidents or the party in power, the government's rights. I would like to know how is it that we don't normally say it when people are overtaking their steps or their bounds, their rights under the law. But when the government does that with arresting people themselves, we come and then we always hear government attacking people's rights and stuff. That's the question I would want to ask. Thank you.
But the democracy comes with responsibilities, okay? Even when the Constitution grants you human rights and freedoms, it comes with some corresponding responsibility or obligations, okay? Your rights are not absolute. There are some obligations, okay? And so it's important that people live within the confines of the laws, okay? Is it Felix, right? So Felix, but you see, Churchill was speaking in more or less it was an irony. So
okay, Doc.
Figure of speech, we call it irony. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. This was an irony. Okay. Says that, well, it's the worst form, except for all those tried from time to time. So clearly, the dictatorship, the tyranny, and the despotism, the totalitarian regime by Benito Mussolini, Joseph Stalin, and this. He said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those tried from time to time. Clearly, it was an irony. Okay, he's not saying that democracy is the worst system of government. Okay, even though it has some weaknesses, right? The alternatives are generally worse. The alternatives are scarier. You understand? That is what he means. It is the worst form of government except for all those. So when we say worst, it's the worst except for all those forms tried from time to time. Nothing comes closer to it. So despite the inherent weaknesses of democracy, there is none that can be compared to it. Okay? There's no other alternative. As we always say, if you think democracy is expensive, try what? If you think democracy is expensive, try maybe dictatorship. Eh? Yeah, so that is it. When you compare it with dictatorship, military rule, or authoritarianism, democracy provides important mechanisms for correcting these problems. The problems that come with it, like corruption. Democracy itself has mechanisms like special prosecutor, the courts, the police, Yoko, to deal with what? With the corruption. But if it were military rule or monarchy, and they say the king or the king's daughter has stolen money, who can even question, the king or the king's daughter? You understand? So even though it has weaknesses, well, it is all we have. Compared to others, there's none that comes closer. He was making an ironical statement. It was an irony, okay? It's the worst form of government, except from the ones, practiced from time to time. And we know the ones practiced from time to time. Now, how do we know which democracies are doing well? For example, Ghana is a democracy. US is a democracy. New Zealand is a democracy. How do we know which democracy is doing well? Even Nigeria is a democracy. So many new democracies are seen to have democratized only in terms of elections. So then that is the minimalist criteria or illiberal democracies. They have neglected the building of constitutional guarantees and liberties. But as students of comparative politics, how do we know the classification of democracies? Okay. Now, Robert Dahl in 71. Today, this is the second time you are meeting. No, this is the third time you are meeting Robert Dahl. First, where did you meet him? And second, where did you meet him?
11.
Today, when we are looking at the notions, okay, Dahl and Scampeter, they talk about the procedural, okay? Dahl and then Scampeter. Now, when we went to democratic development, 3 milestones, how democracies have developed, right? Incorporation, representation, and organized opposition. You are meeting Dahl for the third time. He's talking about credentials of democracy. For democracy to thrive, or for us to say there is democracy, I mean, there should be freedoms, freedom of association. I mean, yes, elections, right? Clean and fair elections. Elected executive, freedom of expression, and the likes. People's liberties. Independent judiciary. You have an effective legislature to serve as oversight, okay, checks and balances. These are the credentials. So, based on how a country adopts these elements, whether or not they enforce these elements well, we can tell which democracies do well. Okay. My dear friends, at best, we need to check different countries. So when we take Ghana, for example, we check to what extent do we have freedom of association? Elections, how is it clean? The executive, is it elected? Is there freedom of expression? Do we have independent judiciary? What is the nature of the legislature? We have to examine that. When we take Nigeria, we have to examine that. US, we examine that. Okay, now this task has been done neatly by some reputable organizations, because we don't have the resources to go from country to country. How many states do we have? Yes. How many states do we have?
It depends.
It depends.
193.
Okay, 193. Okay, which one are you giving? So even if we want to use 193, the membership roster, okay, the membership roster of the UN, can we go to all the 193 countries to examine their freedom of speech, the liberties, the elections? We cannot. And so the Economist Intelligence Unit, EIU, they have done that for us. And every year they do this research and they publish it as what? Democracy Index. We call it Democracy Index. The EIU, okay, comes with this, UK. We also have Freedom in the World reports. This is also done by the Freedom House based in the US, Freedom House. This is the latest report, Freedom in the World 2026, and the title is The Growing Shadow of Autocracy. Now, the Democracy Index, this is the latest report. The latest report is the 2025 version, okay, 2025 version. And we will be using the Democracy Index to know which countries are doing well when it comes to democracy. We will also be using the V-Dem, we call it Varieties of Democracy. Are you with me? Hello.
Hi.
Yes, V-Dem.
Hello, Prof.
So the V-Dem is called Varieties of Democracy. And this is the latest report, Democracy Report 2026. And there's the title, Unraveling the Democratic Era. And when you check the cover page of the V-Dem report, the latest report, this is the cover page. Now, can you describe the image you are seeing? Describe the image you are seeing there for me.
American flag.
American flag,
Yes,
okay.
The US flag.
The US flag. And can you describe the nature of the US flag as it is depicted here?
It's torn and it has
It's
SOS
torn and
it has some
things in it. It is torn, it is dirty, and then it has some writings. What's the writings?
SOS.
SOS means what?
Save our soul.
Save our soul.
Save our soul. And this is what is happening to the US democracy. Okay? So the US democracy is falling apart. So when you see the flag, dirty with some, it is tearing apart with what? SOS. Clearly, and you see that it is not only the V-Dem report that singles out the US. Most all the three data sets, Democracy Index and Freedom House reports, they all single out the US. That this year in question, their democracy is what is falling. So the one who mentioned US, in the first place, US has not been a full democracy. And this year in particular, they are even struggling. They are even further falling apart. All right. So here we are. The Democracy Index began in 2006. Okay, 2006. And it gives a snapshot of the state of democracy globally in 167 independent states and 2 territories. I want somebody to explain this statement for me. 167 independent states, and 2 territories. What does it mean? We just spoke about how many states do we have in the world, and you said it depends. Now, can you explain this statement for me?
Prof, it
Yes.
means that 167 state practices democracy, whilst 2 are non-democratic states.
No.
They are recognized as...
No. Any other attempt?
Sir, it
Yes.
means that 167 recognized states or
Yes.
countries, and two states or countries that are not recognized.
Yes, that's the meaning of what this statement. Okay, so 167 independencies, these ones, well, they are what accepted, okay, by the constitutive theory, and so no two ways about them. But there are 2 other countries which have some question marks, and so the EIU, for political reasons, cannot declare them as what independent states. And so to be safe, they say 2 territories. But in practice, the 2 territories are also their states. Just that, as we mentioned, recognition of states is political. And so if you are a reputable organization, you don't want to meddle in global politics, global political affairs. For you to say you use 169 independent states, because maybe those 2, they are contested by other bigger states. So you don't want to surround, yourself with this control. So you say, well, 2 territories. But in effect, they are de facto states. Are you with me? That's what I want you to say. Now, so they measure, if you like, 169 entities, and they assign some scores to them. Okay, they assign some scores to them. They use 5 variables. The electoral process, these are the 5 variables. Electoral process and pluralism, the civil liberty, the function of government, political participation, and political culture. So they move from country to country, they have representatives, and they send questionnaires, at least 60 questions. Okay, maybe 12 questions border on the electoral process and pluralism. Okay, in Ghana, are elections free and fair? Do we allow the opposition to have some, are the opposition free to campaign without any, government overreach? Is the electoral commission so at least for 12 questions, they all want to understand whether the electoral process is free and fair, or there's a multi-party election in Ghana. Are different political parties allowed to compete or contest? Are they given, equal opportunity? So all these questions, they are answering the first variable, electoral process. Then we come to civil liberty. Are people allowed the freedom to speak? Can people criticize the government? Okay, at least 12 different questions that border on civil liberty. So at the end of the day, we have a questionnaire that has at least 60 questions addressing these 5 variables. Okay, and they assign score to each of these variables on a scale of 0 to 10. Are you with me? So if the people argue that, the electoral process is free and fair, blah, 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 well, maybe they assign you maybe 9 out of 10. Okay. And at the end of the day, we do a weighted average. Okay, so we take the average, and the higher your score, the better it is for you. Right? Hello.
Hello, Prof. With you.
So,
Prof, we are with you. Prof, we are with you.
When you write Poly 214 and you get 90% or 100%, what is the score you see on your transcript? And then you get A, What score will you see on your transcript? What mark?
100%.
No. What mark will you see?
A.
12.
A by
4.0.
A
12. 4.0.
4.0, right? You see
Yes, sir.
4.0. Yes,
Yes,
that's
sir.
maximum score. So all the courses you do, if you get maximum score, is 4.0. Now, when you get to 400, and then we do the FGPA, what is the highest mark you can have?
4.0.
It's also 4.0, yes. So we will divide, we take what the weighted average. We divide everything by the number of credit hours or courses. And so it will reach what? 4. So that if you get from 3.6, how do we classify you? 3.6 to 4. You are first class.
First class.
So that is exactly what the democracy index also does. So at the end of it all, we have an overall score, which is also 0 to 10. Okay, 0 to 10. If you get 10 out of 10, that is a perfect score. The higher your score, the better it is. So if a country at the end of it all gets 9, and the other gets 4, which of them is more democratic? Yes.
9.
9, very good. So at the end of it all, if a country scores from 8 to 10, we call it full democracy. Are you with me? Full democracy. And full democracy, these are states where civil liberties and fundamental freedoms are highly respected. People's freedoms are highly respected. And this is what reinforced by political culture that is favorable to full operationalization of democratic principles. There is valid system of checks and balances, independent judiciary. The media is independent. Okay, these are full democracies. And when I said US is not a full democracy, we mean it, because it didn't get between 8 and 10. In 2022, only 24 states were full democracies. 2023, yes, still the number was 24. 2024, the number shot up to 25. Now, this year, what is the number? How many states are full democracies? Maybe that is something I will let you go and find out. Now, if a country gets from 6 to 7.99, how do we call it? We call it flawed democracy. Okay, flawed democracy. And Ghana is found in this space. US is found in this space. Now, what are flawed democracies? Now, these are states where elections are free and fair and basic civil liberties are promoted, but they have some issues. Media freedom, infringement, and minor suppression of political opposition and critics. Like maybe if you do something small, you say, oh, Moncheno, Moncheno. Of course, but basic liberties are enforced, except that minor suppression of minority, okay, and political opposition and critics. These states have significant faults in other democratic aspects, including underdeveloped political culture, low participation in politics, and issues in the function of governance. These are flawed democracies. Okay. Elections are free and fair, like in Ghana. There are basic liberties, Chapter 5 of the Constitution, yes, and there are institutions to uphold these laws. But there are minor suppressions of people's freedoms and liberties, opposition, something small, just small. Now, in 2022, there were 48 states. In 2023, the number shot to 50. But in 2024, the number reduced to 46. And the reduction, where did it go? I want somebody to tell me, where did the reduction go? They were 50 in 2023, but 2024, the number was 46. Where do you think the reduction went to? Yes.
Full democracies.
Very good. Aha. So one of them transitioned, one of them improved. Okay. It's just like you are in the second class, but maybe you are for 3.57. So maybe at the end of the semester, you scored a lot of A's, and so you have moved, you have jumped from the second class to first class. Okay. So sometimes those that maybe had maybe 7.8 or 7.95, if they improve, they can advance to full democracy. While some of them too that were maybe 6.5, if you fall, you can also come to hybrid regime. So you understand? So some went up and some fell. It is allowed, overtaking is allowed, and then falling also is also allowed. Now, if a country scored between 4 and 5.99, we call it hybrid regime or competitive authoritarianism. Now, these are states where they have regular electoral fraud. Election, not there you go, but they will steal you big time. Regular electoral fraud. Therefore, there is no free and fair election. Okay? And these states commonly have governments that apply pressure on political opposition. The judiciary is never independent. Corruption is widespread. Harassment on the media. The rule of law has anemia. Rule of law, no? You know, we don't have, there is nothing like equality before the law and what have you. Okay, the political culture is also underdeveloped. Political participation is low. And the function of government has what issues. In 2022, we had 36 states. 2023, 34 states. And then we also have, if a country scores from 0 to 3.99, these are authoritarian regimes. Okay? Complete authoritarian regimes. Here, political pluralism is non-existent. In these regimes, some of them, no elections at all. Like the absolute of monarchies, no elections. So they are not democracies, they are authoritarian regimes. We have absolute monarchies or dictatorships. Even where they will have election, it is severely impaired. My dear friends, we are going to stop here. And then if there are any questions, comments, okay? Any question, comment. But this is the 2025 Democracy Index. Okay, so today, as we speak, you know that there are 26 full democracies. There are 48 flawed democracies. We have 32 hybrid regimes and then 61 authoritarian regimes. Yes, Felix.
Yes, Prof. Prof, I wanted to understand this. A country like Togo.
Yes.
I don't know where it has been classified though, but I want to believe that since we have body like EIU, we have a body like UNESCO, ECOWAS, and others. Why would they sit down looking at country? They cannot call them advise their leaders, executive leaders, so that they can be a transparent selection of the electoral commission and all this. And sometimes those bodies come to witness our elections. They will be so diplomatic in their reports so that they will not point out in clear letters what the problems are, so that citizens they'll stop disturbing their citizens.
So in 1648, there was the Treaty of Westphalia, okay? And when you go back to the Treaty of Westphalia, it clearly states that there is the principle of non-intervention. And this is also part of the UN principles, non-intervention, and many other protocols, okay? So it is not easy for an outside body to come and usurp the sovereignty of a state. That is why they are diplomatic, and you cannot also dictate to states. Okay, yes, I mean how they should run their affair. When we get to authoritarianism, you will see how authoritarian leaders justify their rule or their claim to legitimacy. They will even say that is their version of democracy. Okay. And so the so-called liberal democracy is just a construct. What they are practicing is their version of democracy. And so, and then you see Togo, but you see, maybe you will wait. I'm going to share the latest report for you. And as I have given you, okay, the scale. So all I want you to know, my dear friends, I don't expect you to memorize the over 167 countries and 2 territories, whether one is a full democracy, authority. No, you need to know only this. This is the scheme. If a country gets 0 to 3.99, how do you classify it? Okay. If it gets 4 to 4.99. So I will let you answer that question. Now, if Togo's score was around 2.9 thereabout, okay? 2.9. So how do you classify Togo?
Authoritarian.
Fantastic.
Authoritarian regime.
Togo is an authoritarian regime. Niger is an authoritarian regime. Nigeria clearly will be what? A hybrid regime. So in exam or at any point in time, if I want to quiz you, I will give you the countries plus their democratic or index, their democracy score. And then you should be able to tell me that, oh, this one is a flawed democracy. That one is a full democracy. You understand that? All right.
Yeah.
Good. Any other question?
Yes, Prof.
Yes. Any question?
Yes, my question is about the U.S. Does it mean U.S. elections are not free and fair to democracy index?
Oh, the flawed democracies, okay. Elections are free and fair, okay. Elections are free and fair. Basic liberties are honored, but they have issues with media freedom, infringement. So you see, U.S. infringement on the media. Look at Donald Trump, the way he's harassing critics, even universities. Okay. Critics, opposition, the media, and all that, sometimes he's using a visa to sabotage university admissions, okay? Because maybe they are criticizing the regime, he wants to call them to order, and that is flawed democracy. So with flawed democracy, elections are free and fair. Basic liberties are honored, but then the regime, if you criticize the regime or, they have a way to, okay? So flawed democracy it's also a democracy. What's their source? So when I ask you, sometimes when we want to know the democracies in the world, you put the full democracy and the flawed together. So put them together. Let's use the latest figures. If we want to know how many countries are democracies, you put add 26 to 48. What do you get? What do you get? 26 and 48. What do you get?
74.
74. And if we want to know the non-democracies, you will add the hybrid regime to the authoritarian. And what do you get?
93.
93. So that is what it means. The flawed, they are also democracies, except that we want to separate the boys from the men. And then with the non-democracy, the two, hybrid or authoritarian, they are both non-democracies. Okay. All right. So my dear friends, if Nigeria, what was Nigeria's score? If say around 4.23, how do you classify Nigeria? If it's hybrid regime, okay, then you go and explain what being by what hybrid regime. Regular electoral fraud. So elections are not free and fair. the government applies pressure on political opposition, the judiciary, So clearly, that is. So all I want you to do is to what? Master the scores. So that if I tell you a country with their democracy score, you should be able to tell me what kind of democracy it practices, okay, or regime. Any other question?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. So in the absence of any question, let me thank you for. Okay, yes, Kisi, Ima.
I said, does it mean those with full democracies they don't have any flaw?
They have some flaws. That is why the score is from 8 to 10. Okay. So if you have 8, it means you are not perfect. There are some flaws. Okay. So for them, they have some shortfall, and you see, these states have only limited problems in democratic function. They have limited problems. Their problems are not widespread. Okay, depending on the score the country will get. There are some challenges with maybe function of government, but because maybe not all the citizens might be fully employed or other issues, okay? Maybe a bit of sabotages and what have you. But these are limited problems, but they are not fault-proof, okay? But even depending on the score, if a country like France, which used to be a flawed democracy at one of the years, improved, clearly it will still have certain flaws, except that it has improved a bit. So we'll say that the 8 are not prepared, maybe 8.2. Clearly they have some flaws. But if one with maybe 9.5, okay, with 9.5, clearly you will see that in terms of how they look at Norway with 9.8, right? 9.8, clearly you will see that the flaws there will be so trivial, inconsequential. All right, but the scores will determine the nature of the flaws and the intensity of the flaws. Okay, but they might even be unnoticeable. Okay, all right. Any other question, my dear friends? Fantastic. Thank you very much for your contribution and then your participation. Enjoy the rest of your week and see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.